Of course, my apologies. So that's really just to pay tribute to our staff that deployed to Indonesia at short notice following the loss of Lion Air Flight 610 on the 29th of October, with the loss of 189 lives. Basically, 4 of our staff went at the request of the government of Indonesia to assist the Indonesian investigating body, that's the ATSB, with the download and analysis of the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorders. So I'm very proud of our staff, selflessly deployed at very short notice with no time off for some considerable time.
Well, on behalf of this committee, and to the extent we're able on behalf of the government, would you pass on our thanks to them too for their effort. Senator Steele.
Thanks, Chair. Mine's out of left field, Mr Hood, and I just think Transport Safety Bureau, and we know the work in rail and maritime and aviation, why don't you inquire into truck accidents when there's deaths? And I don't have a loaded question, I don't know.
No, it's obviously a policy discussion. I don't know if Dr Kennedy would care to comment.
Well, you're correct. The ATSB doesn't do, how shall I describe it, Mr Hood, no fault investigations of trucking accidents. We are aware of the ATA and others calling for the
it was raised with me last week, that's why I raised it.
Calling for the ATSB to have a role, and the government's made no decision around that call or made any announcements, but we are certainly aware of the interest in trucking, in the ATSB having a role in trucking. And it does, I'll just ask Mr Hood, I understand similar bodies have a role in other countries.
There's certainly, Senator, in the United States, the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, investigates aviation, rail, maritime, road and gas pipeline accidents and incidents.
Yeah. I mean, of course, it sounds, you know, a fair question that with that goes staffing and funding and all. Yeah, all right, that's right. Thank you.
Well, if we
later.
accidentally have a change of government here, Mr Hood, under the new Minister for Road Safety, you'll have, your staff will be doubled, your budget will be trebled. So,
well, thank you, Senator. Appreciate that.
We'll look forward to that. We'll keep an eye on that.
Well, if I may, Senator, I do believe that the ATSB is well placed with the skill set to investigate any transport accident.
Thank you.
All right. I remember in my early days as a detective, detectives used to have to do them, and we were completely ill-equipped to investigate them with any skill, I can tell you. Senator Patrick.
Okay, my line of questioning is going to go to the issue of Angel Flight and the instrument that has been tabled in the Parliament, and I've moved a disallowance which will be decided in the next Parliament, but I do want to talk to you about some details, because obviously you are in the processes of investigating a flight, an Angel flight that occurred. So that's the context, and I'll put on the record that I've spoken to a number of people involved who've talked to me about various different matters, and I'll just put also on the record that because they're connected to these proceedings and the questions I'm about to ask, I view them as being protected by parliamentary privilege, because some people may have talked to me about.
Just hold on, let's be clear.
Sure.
What are you endeavouring to establish here? That
I'm just
because
saying,
you mentioned them.
No, I'm saying I might ask some questions that go to some of the investigations that have been carried out, that they're currently carrying out.
Yeah, but why would these individuals? Why would you need to put on record these? It just sounds like you're bestowing parliamentary privilege to, and it may be the case.
I'm just saying that I've had conversations with people who perhaps told me things that they might not otherwise have been able to tell me, but for the fact that I'm about to engage in some questions.
Yeah, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure you should give them the confidence that the Parliament. Well, no, Rex. I just don't want to leave it hanging.
Okay.
The words parliamentary privilege were used. I'm not sure that it's up to us to bestow that on a whistleblower, if you like, who's shared information or documents with you. I don't know that it just works like that. We've already had, you might remember, we had some in-camera
Sure.
whistleblowers recently, and the advice we had was that information at their disposal in a documentary form probably shouldn't have been.
I've taken advice from the clerk, so,
Oh, all right. Well, if you want to cite the clerk into the hand, so you go ahead.
yeah. Okay,
Senator,
so,
would it help if I just outlined where we're at in terms of the investigation,
my understanding is that, well, yeah, you can do that, yeah.
if I may? Senators, on the 28th of June 2017, a Tobago aircraft impacted terrain near Mount Gambier, killing all 3 on board. The ATSB sent an investigation team, and obviously we followed due process since then to investigate the accident, and then of course to provide the natural justice opportunity to those directly involved in that accident, that being primarily the regulator, Civil Aviation Safety Authority, and Angel Flight to respond to us. We provided an extension to those parties up until last Friday. We've received a substantial submission from both parties, and from my perspective, in terms of due process, natural justice, public interest, and of course the sensitivities of next of kin, the ATSB hasn't traditionally talked about investigations that are currently underway, and we think we're about a month to a month and a half away from the final publication of that investigation report.
Sure. On my question, I'm not going to go to the accident itself, okay? So I respect that that you wish to, that there's good reasons for us not speculating on things. What I want to do, however, is I want to match the instrument that's been tabled against facts that are involved in that particular accident. So you'd be aware that an instrument has been tabled that requires, 250 hours of in command time. Just a simple question of fact, because we were told that this instrument was in some sense in response to the previous Angel Flight crash and indeed this crash. The pilot in both of those crashes didn't have, or they had more than 250 hours, is my understanding. I'm just asking you to confirm that. I can actually go through each one of the requirements in here and ask you whether or not it would have had an effect on the previous flight and indeed this flight. So I'm not actually trying to get to the cause of the accident.
Yeah, sure.
I'm trying to focus on, if this instrument were in play, would it have made a difference in either Mount Gambier or the previous flight?
And Senator, thank you. The difficulty for us is that being in the natural justice process,
sure,
we've done our analysis, we've come up with our draft findings. We're obviously aware of the CASA instrument. We weren't consulted in relation to the CASA instrument, but we're aware of it. And of course, commenting on the merits of CASA's instrument in a draft report sense, in our findings, is not complete. So, as I said, we've received substantial input from both Angel Flight and from CASA in relation to our draft report. And so I think it's premature for us to comment in relation to CASA's instrument.
But for example, in the case of the Mount Gambier flight, my understanding is the pilot had something like 350 hours in command time.
My understanding,
and that's just a question of fact. That's not revealing anything.
No, it's my understanding it was below 500 hours.
And it wasn't in a helicopter, although I know the helicopter's now been removed from a new instrument. But I could go to the maintenance requirements. There's a requirement in the new instrument that talks about whether or not the pilot must check whether the aeroplane has undergone a periodic inspection within the last 100 hours of service of the aeroplane. Now, my understanding is in both of those cases, and you will have knowledge of this, that requirement there would not have changed the outcome either in Mount Gambier or in the previous flight.
So, Senator...
just before you do, Senator, you're doing a bit of the butler in the library with the candlestick here. You're going slowly dismantling. I mean, Mr. Hood indicated he didn't want to contribute to your comparative, and now you're going line by line.
No, well, in fact, what I offered at the start was for him to say, he could simply tell me. So I'm not trying to get to what the cause of the flight is or what happened. I'm trying to get to this instrument and whether or not that instrument
but if you rule out that the pilot was under 500 and the aircraft had 2 wings and one wheel, you're eventually going to rule out things that don't impact on the instrument, therefore would be findings of
I'm
these in the
I'm not
inquiry.
trying to get to the cause of the accident, Chair. I'm simply trying to examine whether
Were
or
you
not...
at the CASA briefing in this room? Because I put to CASA whether those 2 events that they had cited had any bearing on the development of the instrument. They told me they did not. They told me that's not why they developed the instrument, and that neither of those accidents would have been prevented, if you like, had the instrument been in place. That's been that wasn't in evidence, but that was in a briefing.
Well, I'm trying to get to an understanding of why they've changed what they've changed. And my understanding is in your report, once again, without going to the details of your report, you spend a lot of time looking at Angel Flight, the operations of Angel Flight, as opposed to the accident as it occurred.
Senator, in our draft report, we've looked at both the what happened and the why in terms of the Angel Flight accident at Mount Gambier, and consistent with looking at the why, we've obviously looked at the operator as we have looked at the regulator as well. I think the other point to make might be that we're completely independent of CASA in this matter. We,
Sure.
Our report has been developed in complete isolation of any action that CASA may have chosen to take in relation to that instrument.
Sure, but if I just explore that, if you're intending to make some adverse outcome or finding in relation to Angel Flight, perhaps suggesting that their pilots are under pressure, for example, because that was indicated to us by Mr. Carmody, that their pilots are under a particular pressure because they, because of the nature of these flights. I'm presuming if your report, well, my understanding is your report does effectively say that, and your draft report says that, but not grounded by evidence. You haven't interviewed in your report you haven't gone to a whole range of different Angel Flight pilots and talked to them about pressures that they may have?
Senator, our methodology requires us to be evidence-based,
Sure.
and a final report will be evidence-based.
Okay.
I think in relation to maintenance procedures, for example, we'll make some statement in our final report about that. But in relation
but that's in relation to the particular flight, isn't it?
It'll be in relation to our observations
Sure.
whether maintenance is a contributing factor to any of the accidents or incidents we've looked at. But I really don't think that I should be in a position to prejudice the final report, given that we've got substantial feedback from the involved parties.
Okay,
and we're in the process of examining
to,
that to incorporate that
without
into
going
the
to the
final
report, have you gone out and talked to a whole range of Angel Flight pilots?
Part of our methodology is obviously to speak to witnesses and involved persons.
Okay, so witnesses to the flight, to the
certainly witnesses to the
Yep.
accident.
Okay, so I understand that, and
involved persons.
And involved persons would be, I presume, Angel Flight, and.
Senator, we've talked to a number of people in relation to this investigation.
So my question, this does not go to the outcome of your investigation, but in the process of your investigation, have you talked to a number of Angel Flight pilots to try and establish whether or not they are under pressure to commence a flight or to
Senator, certainly in pursuance of the reasons why the accident happened, we've talked to a number of people that are well informed in this space.
I'm being really specific, and I really would like an answer to this. Have you talked to Angel Flight pilots, a number of them, and if so, how many, in respect of pressures that might be put on them relating to community service flights?
Senator, we have talked to Angel Flight pilots, and I have to take on notice how many.
How many? Okay, thank you. Is there any... you understand these community service flights provide a public service in that people are not required to pay for the service that is that gets them to their chemotherapy, for example.
Senator,
Or
I think
gets-
everybody lauds the concept of community surface flights, specifically for regional Australia. So we recognise the value in that. And at a meeting recently with the Angel Flight principals, we reiterated that there's certainly nobody in the ATSB that is trying to shut Angel Flight down. What we are tasked to do is find out what happened in an accident and why to prevent a recurrence, and that's what it tells me we're supposed to do under the Act.
Sure. So you won't make any recommendations as bold as saying that we should shift these flights across to RPT where people have to pay.
Senator, once again, it's premature to speculate on the outcome because we're still working through the submissions of those people.
The reason I say that is because in most investigations, I've read a number of your reports. They're all on the website, and
They're all first class.
Yeah, there was one that wasn't, so but it's been redone.
8 years
now.
ago, Senator.
Okay,
I've got the second one here if you need it.
I'll be very keen when this comes out to have a look at the focus that you've put on the flight, which is exactly what I think you should do, versus the operations of Angel Flight.
Sure, understood, Senator. Let me say that any recommendation we make will usually be couched in outcome-based phraseology, like the strength controls should be, the controls should be strengthened. And, those recommendations can go to operators or to regulators.
Sure.
And once again, until we work through the submissions, we won't come to a final position in relation to what a recommendation may or may not be.
Now, Mr. Carmody also indicated, and he's provided some data to this committee about statistics associated with Angel Flight. But he also said that your report would go to some statistics on Angel Flight. A concern has been raised with me that the statistical approach that you've taken may be flawed in that, for example, you might be comparing private flights across a particular period with CSF flights over a different period. That's not something you would do?
So, Senator, we have, in relation to not only statistics but the analysis of statistics, we've got about 8 PhDs in the organisation. They are very well versed at the methodology in terms of data analysis, as is the manager. So we have manager review, a director review, and of course we have commission review of that analysis. In addition, we've also offered certainly Angel Flight the opportunity to view and criticise that analysis if they think that it is incorrect. We'll certainly look at that in their submission, which I can't comment on because it arrived only I think on Friday.
Sure. In relation to the number of flights, so Mr. Carmody in his analysis suggested he was only using the sector that involved the actual passenger as opposed to positioning flights. Now that seems flawed to me because the position, if one of the issues is pressure on pilots, there's also pressure associated with the positioning. In your analysis, are you including all of the
We've certainly made mention of that in our analysis, and once again, that's subject to feedback from both parties.
Okay. And just in those comparisons, I don't want us to get to a point where the report comes out and we have to go through, some oversight committee as to...
I'm more than happy, Senator, once that we have received the submissions, when we have analysed the submissions from the directly involved parties, incorporated those into the final version that's been approved by the Commission, I'm more than happy to offer a briefing to the senators.
Yeah, okay, because another concern I might have is that when you compare a typical private pilot's flight with a CSF flight, there may be some more complication involved in those particular flights. I just wonder how that's drawn out in the statistics.
And once again, Senator, we've made a statement in our analysis in the draft report, which is obviously subject to comment by Angel Flight and by CASA.
Okay.
Senator, your 15 minutes, which is actually 35 minutes, is maybe the only thing that stands between us and working through dinner and going home tonight, or not.
Dinner versus oversight.
How about you take up with Mr Hood tomorrow and have lunch together and continue this very interesting conversation.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay, look, I will leave it at that. I just... well, actually, can I just ask Mr Hood to take a question on notice?
Cross with Janet Rice.
She did sponsor me for $100 in the last CEO sleep out for St Vincent de Paul. I'd be happy to take any. This year I'd be happy to take further sponsorships. Thank you, Senator.
Can I ask you, let's assume that your report it comes out, you say in about a month and a half?
So my understanding is an extensive submission received only late last week, so usually would take us around about a month to incorporate any changes that might need to be made in the final report. Then it goes to the Commission for a public approval to release. So at the earliest, I would say that second week of May would be the earliest. It would be around about the 18th, I think.
Whenever our questions on notice due back?
23rd of May is the date.
Which date? 23rd of May.
23rd of May, isn't it? Or 22nd of May.
Okay, so can I ask, and you'll have an option if you haven't released the report at that stage to advance any public interest immunity that you need to.
Sorry, I just missed the question, Senator.
I haven't come to the question. I'm just saying that you'll have the opportunity to advance a public interest immunity if your report hasn't been published and the answers need to come back before that. To go through the current regulation before the House or before the Senate and simply indicate which one of if any of the terms or provisions would have changed the outcome of the Mount Gambier accident.
Senator, we'll take that notice to have a look at what we can do in that regard.
Yeah.
But don't admit it. It sits on the record that the CASA have admitted that it would not have.
Well, in a discussion with me and Ms Sharkey MP, they indicated that the motivation for this particular instrument was these flights.
Well, you get together with me and I'll
Sure.
write to Mr Carmody and have him confirm back to me in writing what he told me in the briefing while he sat at the chair beside where you are.
So just the distinction is that maybe he wasn't saying each one of these directly indicated, but he said the motivation for looking at this flowed from these accidents.
Okay, well, I don't know how he can do that. That's a big stretch. All right, Senator McCarthy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mr Hood, I just wanted to get an update on an investigation and just where it's at with the Northern Territory with the Cessna 210 on the 23rd of October 2017.
Senator, thank you. Public release will be tomorrow.
Okay, so it's actually completed now, is it?
Yeah, sadly, once again for the Senator's information, a Cessna 210 at the beginning of the wet season departed Darwin to repatriate an Indigenous person to a community. Only got about less than 10 miles from Darwin on climb and encountered some weather, and the wings failed on the Cessna 210, and it's the loss of life of two young pilots, and so that'll be published on tomorrow.
Okay, so just in terms of the recommendations from that, obviously you can only talk about that post tomorrow, or are you able to?
Senator, I'm happy to send a copy of that report to your office tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Senators. Thank you, Mr Hood, as always, and through you to your colleagues and for the preparation and attendance, and we wish you a safe journey back to your intended destination.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
And if airports and